I am so happy to do this webinar today. This is going to be a different one than some of you have attended in the past. My name's Laura Wigglesworth, and I am the Senior Talent Advisor at Callings. We are an AI career platform that helps people from A to Z. We're not talking today about how to hone your resume, how to, I, you know, find jobs with the help of AI. We are talking about something bigger and something a lot more basic about you and who you are as a person. And my guest today is Jennifer Porter. I call her Jen. Jen is a leadership coach and an author, and she's someone that I've known for 20 years. I think it's about 20 years. I first met Jen when she was leaving Microsoft, and I interviewed her to replace me as a recruiter at Path, which is a global health organization based in Seattle, Washington. And I was thinking about that day, and two things 20 years later still stand out to me from that interview. One was her thoughtfulness and the way that she asked me questions. So it was almost like I was there to interview her and she was interviewing me. And we're going to do that today too. And two was her listening skills. So these two qualities, that's, I think, what makes her an excellent recruiter, and they're a big part of what makes her a great career coach today. So after Path, Jen went to lead recruiting for the International Justice Mission. I encourage you to check out that organization, where she helped build a team of recruiters dedicated to rescuing enslaved and exploited people all around the world. And then approximately 8 years ago, she took another leap and she started her own coaching practice. Since then, she's helped hundreds of women gain clarity about their values, career transitions, how they want to grow as leaders, and build lives that reflect both their values and their faith. And her new book, Lioness, grew out of that work. So, Lioness is a story of women who have endured adversity, discovered strengths they didn't know they had, found purpose, and with the help of others, pursued that purpose. And as I read the book, I noticed something surprising, which was that whether the women were executives or military officers, there was a politician, there was an entrepreneur, or mothers, they all shared this similar journey, a path where they experienced hardship and they underestimated themselves. But they reached a turning point at various stages where they stopped living out their fear and other people's expectations. And with the help of community that believed in them, they used those experiences as a springboard to a new life chapter or career. And that's what we're going to talk about today, because many of us have spent years climbing every rung on the ladder, meeting expectations that other people have for us, caring for others. But as Jen wrote in the book, one of the lines that I wrote down that meant a lot to me was that the body reacts, but that the soul reveals. So sometimes we have to slow down long enough to ask a different question, which is not necessarily what's my next job, but who am I becoming? So that's sort of what today is about. We're going to, along the way, Jen and I are going to have a conversation, a discussion, and we're going to pause for some short reflection exercises that you can all do. And we'll think about our challenges, who has shaped us, and who makes up our pride, which is the people that will support us along the way. And we'll also think about where we want to go next. So the three themes are adversity, community, or finding your pride, and then purpose, where we want to go. And I'm going to show you also in the second half, probably the last 20 minutes, some tools of Callings that can help you along the way. And I'm going to give you a code for free access to Callings to try it out. So Jen, welcome. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Laura. I'm thrilled to be here and welcome to everybody that's joined in.
The question
Okay.
that I have for you is start out by talking about your own journey. I mean,
Yeah.
the chapter of the book is the day I roared. So I want to hear about that.
Mhm.
What happened
Yeah.
and why did it become an inspiration for the book?
Yeah. Thanks, Laura. So, first, I'm going to talk about the story of how I met Laura. So, from my perspective, she's already shared a bit of that, but I was going through a very difficult season when I met Laura. I had been laid off back in 2000. 2009 from Microsoft, along with thousands of other people, is a really difficult time to be unemployed and a really scary time. There were a lot of people in the marketplace that had a similar skill set that I had. And so that took a lot of courage to be in the job search during that time. And I found Path not because had done some strategic search and found it myself. Actually, someone told me about it. They had seen the job description and said, this sounds like you. And it was a global recruiter at this nonprofit called Path. And I got an interview. And so that's when I met Laura. And it's interesting to think about the pathways that we take in our lives because Laura was at a point in her life where she wanted to make a change. There's a lot going on where she was wanting to move geography to have a different experience in life for her and her family. So she was moving to DC from Seattle, which opened up the spot in Seattle for me. And I got to spend time with her before she made that move. And then, of course, we worked together. And it's just so interesting how the choices that we make and the courageous steps that we take and the paths that we take lead us to these amazing experiences. So you mentioned the name of the chapter in my book. I'm gonna hold up the book cover because I'm so mesmerized by your background, Laura, because it's such the lioness color.
Yeah,
So this is the
that
book.
is just a coincidence. And the fact that we both worked at Path, and this is about women's path, there are
I
a lot of
know.
great,
Yeah.
juxtapositions for us.
Yeah. Yeah. So the book is about awakening the roar that is within all of us. That is the strength that lies within each of us. And that strength really isn't acknowledged or demonstrated until it's required. And we'll talk more about what it means to be a lioness, to be in community with other lioness women. But the chapter that Laura's referring to is the first chapter, which is my own story. So the book is made up of 12 stories of lioness women. And I called mine The Day I Roared because it was a very specific moment. I had, over the course of my life, I had struggled to find my own voice. I was a person who was afraid to speak up in group situations or to express my opinion because I was afraid of consequences. I was afraid of judgment. There's all kinds of reasons why I was afraid to use my voice, but I also hadn't been nurtured to use my voice. And I knew that that was a muscle that I needed to strengthen, but it was a really hard thing to do. And, when I talk about roaring, it's that the thing that's inside of us that needs to be expressed. It's sort of this innate, the nature that we have that often gets silenced. I had been abused and what would you call it, like stalked by someone that was very close to my family, and all through my childhood and even into my adult years, and it created an intense fear in me, and I didn't have people in my life that knew how to handle that, and so I felt really alone in that struggle of trying to defend myself, keep my distance from this person, and protect myself.
Yeah.
And it was in the community with other women. And it was really only about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, that I had voiced in a mastermind that I wanted to label the work that I do Lioness. I wanted to use Lioness as a brand. I wanted to call other women Lioness women. And it just felt so audacious. It felt really bold in a way that I was like, what are people going to think about this? Who am I to use these strong words to describe myself and describe others? And the women in that group said, why not? Why,
Yeah.
why would you not? If that's what you
Yes.
want to do, do it. And a lot of us, for better or for worse, we were waiting for permission, right? Like
Mhm.
permission from someone to tell us it's okay to do something. And, that's part of growth. That's okay. I think it's okay that I needed to be affirmed by my community to be able to take those courageous steps. But what we did in that same mastermind retreat is the person that was leading it encouraged me to walk outside and roar. And I was like, I've tried to roar before. I've tried to use my voice in that way before. I really struggle, and I need
Like literally walking outside
literally to walk outside
and trying to
and go on
sound
the
like a
streets
lion?
in
Okay.
Maryland, yes,
Okay.
and roar. And I thought I can't. I said it's too vulnerable for me. I can't do it. And they said, "What if we did it with you?" And I said, "Okay, I'll do it if we do it together." So the group of women walked out to the street in a busy sidewalk and intersection in Towson, Maryland, and we all like on the count of three, it was like one, two, three, rah! And it was like this full-bodied experience. And the thing about that was
Did the police come? I have to ask.
no. I mean,
Maybe they
we
should
didn't
have.
cause a scene. It
Okay.
just, but it was such a bodily and vocal expression of
Yeah.
something that was inside of me. And the next day, I found out that the person who had been my abuser had died.
Wow.
Now, from a long illness, it had nothing to do with the roar, but
Wow.
the timing was so symbolic for me that it
Hmm.
was like I can now be free to scream
Wow.
and yell and to claim my own voice, and
Yeah.
I'm no longer in harm's way. So
That's a great
that's what
story.
that's how
Mhm.
the chapter start. That's how the book starts,
Mhm.
and it's all about helping us claim our own voice and to find the strength that lies within each of us. My belief is that we are all lioness women. We're all
Mhm.
strong, capable. We need community, but we have this protective nature. We have a nature that rises up when it's needed. And
Mhm.
to be a lioness is not to be wild and crazy, but it's a contained strength that
Mhm.
is exerted when it's needed.
But before there is a reflection exercise for a few minutes I want people to do about the adversity that they have faced. But before we get there, there's one more question I have for you that I want your thoughts on, which is I was struck reading the book. Every woman in the book overcame some significant adversity. So, abuse, you mentioned, illness, burnout, divorce, discrimination, grief. And yet, none of them saw themselves as courageous. So, why do you think so many women underestimate their own strength?
There's a couple of things. I think number one, we're just doing what we feel like we need to do. Well, I think when we face adversity, we don't really think, well, we have a choice here. We have multiple choices here. We just respond
Mhm.
with whatever we think we need to do to protect ourselves and to get through a situation. For me, I did not feel courageous because I still felt afraid all the time, all the time. And even though I was doing things that were courageous and I did use my voice at times and I did, fight to protect myself, um, because I felt so much fear inside of myself, I certainly did not feel like a courageous woman. I felt
Mhm.
like somebody that wanted to hide all the time so I escape what was happening and the scary person.
Mhm.
So, I think that's part of it. The other thing, though, I think that speaks to why we need community is I think we need other people to call it out in us.
Yes.
We need someone to say, Laura, you're freaking courageous. You're bold and you're daring, and I
Yeah.
admire that about you. And you're
And
like,
that's one reason we all need a pride. We're going to talk about that.
yep.
Well, before we go there, though, I would like to invite the audience to participate. And I'm sorry we can't have people share their microphones or their cameras, but because we've had these Zoom bomb problems before. But what I want you to write in the chat is just to identify a challenge that you've overcome, and it doesn't have to be dramatic. It might be a difficult job raising children, caring for an aging parent, surviving a layoff, and write it down. Write it down and then answer the question. So two questions. One is, what is that challenge? And two is, what did the experience teach you about yourself that you didn't know before? So let's take a couple minutes to do that and we can read out what we see in the chat. And Jen, you see the same chat I do, so feel free to read things out. So again, two questions. What is one significant challenge you've overcome or faced? And then what did it teach you about yourself?
I'm struck by Diana's
Feel free
comment.
to read things out loud because I'm looking at a
Yeah.
different
So,
screen.
Diana Z says, I also faced abuse verbally, emotionally, and physically, and homelessness as a single mother. And I have a special
Wow.
needs son. And I now help other women who have undergone similar situations. There's a story in the book, Christy, who was a single mother, trying to protect her kids, trying to protect herself, and how difficult that season was. And she just did what she needed to do to provide for her kids. She worked several jobs and now she's an executive. Never thought she would be, doesn't have the education for an executive level, you would
Yeah.
think, but she worked hard. And it just reminds me of how inspiring her story is. And Diana, you've got a story to tell, my friend.
Mm. Hmm. Speaking in public, caring for a parent with Alzheimer's, and you found a well of patience that you didn't know you had. Yeah.
Mm.
Hmm. Being ghosted in your job hunt. Oh boy. Yeah. I'm so happy I'm not dating these days because I think the same thing is true. People get
Yeah.
ghosted all the time. But definitely, yes, you people get ghosted way more often than they used to. Yeah. Jen, you want to read a couple more and
Mm.
go on?
I'm just looking at Ashley's living long distance from my husband who's in another country. It's
Mm,
taught me the challenges in connecting emotionally through good and bad. And I
mm,
was forced to pivot and understand how important communication with grace is when you don't have the ability to be physically present.
mm.
Yeah.
And again, what did that experience teach you that you didn't know before? That's the second question. So we'll take one more minute.
Being undervalued, Kimberly says. Verbal abuse, being undervalued.
Hmm. Okay,
Mm.
I want to move on to the second part, or theme that we talked about, which is community and finding your pride, which Jen gave a hint to when she went outside with a group of women and roared.
Yeah.
So you actually this word, the word pride, appears a lot in the book, and it doesn't refer to the swelling of feeling good, but to the pride of lionesses.
Yeah.
So I guess my first question is, why is community, and maybe you hinted at this already, why is community so central to becoming who we are? And you said earlier, you said sometimes we need other women to call it out,
Mm-hmm.
strengths in us. So maybe I've already fed you the answer, but do you want to talk a little bit
Yeah.
more about that? Why is community so central to us as women becoming who we are
Yeah.
and achieving what we are meant to achieve?
I just think we're made for it. We're made to do life together. We're not made to do it in isolation. And when we try to do it alone, it goes really badly. And community is what can make us come alive. It's where we draw strength from when we don't have it in ourselves on a particular day. It's where we're a mirror for each other, where our friends can say, you did an amazing job. Like, do you see what you're doing as a mother, as a wife, as a, employee, as a job seeker? I see how hard you're working. And we're our hardest critics, right? And so we are just thinking about all the things we're not doing. We need other people in our lives who love us, who care about us, who can call out the things that we're doing really well in the midst of what is so, so hard. It's just, we don't see ourselves clearly, and we need other people for that. The other thing is, when we talk about a pride or community, it does not have to be large. We can connect with just a couple of people who are trusted, who can be our advocates and go deep in those relationships. Somebody that can, put on their calendar when you have an interview coming up, and they're going to be the one to check in with you after, to find out how did it go. We don't need a ton of people. It's not volume, but it's the depth of relationship and those trusted people that can help us stay afloat when things are the hardest.
So Jen, most of us have people who love us and dear friends, but not everybody has a pride who can challenge or encourage them to dream
Mhm.
big. I think there's a difference. I mean, I'm
Mhm.
gonna say it quietly, but I don't put my husband as one of part of my pride because he's my husband and I love him, but he does not, he encourages me to think smaller, not think bigger. And so I
Wow.
wonder, and I know this is being recorded and he's not, but um, how does somebody build a pride if they don't intentionally have one? Who do we look to?
Yeah, I think it does require some courage of reaching out to people. Whenever I've been in roles, I've always asked for a mentor. I've always sought that out. Is there
Mm,
somebody that can speak into my life? Is there someone that's ahead of me in their career
mhm,
or
mhm,
in life that
mhm,
I could learn from? And so I'm intentionally putting myself in that humble position of learner.
mhm.
And so I think that just asking for what we need. Also, if there's somebody that you think is really in, like, they vibe, you vibe with them, right? You're impressed by them. They're working in an arena that you would like to be in. Reach out. I mean,
Mhm.
it's really affirming when somebody reaches out to us and is like, I think what you're doing is really
I like to be
amazing. And
asked.
yeah, and I'd love to have a coffee with you, or I'd love to
Mhm.
have a conversation. Would you be willing to share how you got to where you are? I mean, who isn't honored by that ask? But usually we're kind of intimidated to ask, or we don't want to bother people. But
Mhm.
actually, it's really honoring. And so I encourage people to reach out. You want to be intentional with who you're asking to be in your circle, and you may want to tell them why. These are the characteristics that I see in you, and I'd like to get to know you better. And
Mhm.
I'm in a season of transition, and I could use some encouragement. Name it what it is that we're needing. I need connections. I need encouragement. I need advice. I need someone just to know what I'm working on.
Mhm.
And there's some strength that comes from that. So looking for those people who we really do admire, that
Mhm.
we want to emulate, and have the characteristics that we want to grow in, so be really specific about who you're choosing to be in your pride.
So maybe say something like, you inspire me, and I wondered if I could buy you a cup of coffee because I'm
Yeah.
looking to make a change.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, my question for the audience then, if you can again write in the chat, is just to name one, two, or three people who see your strengths. So these are people you can call on when you need courage or perspective. So you can give their names, or you can give their titles, or just, if they're an aunt on your mother's side, just you can say that. But go ahead and write in the chat one, two, or three people that who can be part of your pride for your next chapter.
Mm.
I have to go back to my other screen to see now what people are writing. My aunts. Interesting. Okay. I saw up above before it disappeared. Michelle, Tanithia, and Angelique. Okay, so dear friends, great. Okay, Rima's better than me because she said her husband, and I didn't say mine. My sister, my brother. Now, my husband, I've been together 32 years, but there's things you go to him for, there's things you don't. Um, my mom. Okay. Deborah
I
Muhammad.
want to jump in here with something you all are thinking about your people. People are going to let us down sometimes too, and there's a lot of dynamics that come with
Mm,
relationships.
mm,
Uh, I would just encourage you to, for those that may not have stepped up in the past, there's still maybe an opportunity to invite them and
mm,
be and humble ourselves and say, I'm going through a hard time right now. I could really use a friend, or I could use, would you be willing to call me or text me at the end of
mm.
each week and just ask me how I'm doing? Because we don't know how to help people, right?
Yeah,
If they don't tell us what they need. And
you're right.
it how many of us are so independent that we're not asking for help, even if we
Yes.
need it? And so
It's hard to know
I
how to respond when someone says, let me know if you need anything. You're like, yeah, I need a
exactly.
lot of things.
Exactly, exactly. I have a belief that we have to do our own work to be able to name what we do need,
Hmm.
so that when our people are asking us, I'm able to say, would you call me tomorrow?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, could we have dinner next week?
Yeah. So you have
And
to
but
ask.
I have to do that work to understand what would be helpful for me in order to be able to communicate and ask for the help.
Okay, I read a book maybe 40, 35 years ago. My daughter read it called Women Don't Ask, and it's about why men make more than women. And the book was all about Carnegie Mellon professor wrote, economics professor wrote it, and she said women don't negotiate. They see it as a way, they don't see it as a business transaction, but they also just don't like to ask. They like
Mhm.
for someone to come to them and say, I'd like to give you a raise. So you're saying women need to ask, that we can't be afraid to ask. People like to be asked, but if we don't ask,
Yeah.
they may not come to help
And
me.
that's a lot of the clarity that I work with clients on is in preparation for that conversation about negotiation, getting really clear about what would you be happy with? What would
Hmm.
you be so happy with? And then ask for those things. And it doesn't always have to be a monetary number. Sometimes it can be benefits, right?
Yep.
Time off. There could be other things that are valuable. It could be freedom to work from home.
Yep.
There's all kinds of things, but we have to be clear ourselves on what's important to us to then
Mhm.
be able to enter into a negotiation.
That's great. Yep. I like what Sarah said above, Sarah Bramley, who said her former colleagues that they're not her colleagues anymore, but they're still people that she trusts. And it reminded me that so one of the hardest things about being in Washington, D.C. and being part of the Doge movement, so many people, lost their jobs, thousands and thousands and thousands of people, 300,000 total, that a lot of us lost friends. So we
Mm.
lost our, income, our industry, our respect, the respect we had, the titles we had, but also our friends, our relationships. So people have to find a new pride or reconnect with the pride from work. Yeah.
And Laura, to that point, what would you recommend in how do you nurture those relationships that you've lost because you don't see each other every day or you don't talk every week?
Yeah, I think I've been part of a career conversation group that meets every other week, so we have a schedule. Um, but I think it takes work. Yeah, it doesn't just happen. You've got to write to people on a group chat and say we haven't gotten together in a long time. We used to have coffee on Fridays.
Mm.
It's been 7 Fridays and we haven't gotten together. Yeah, who's free? Yeah. Um, Many people. So I want to talk about purpose, listening to your soul, the third, theme for today. And so many people who are watching are in career transition. They've been laid off or they're wondering what's next. And so I want you to talk a little bit about the difference between running away from something and being called to something.
Mhm. Yeah. So my belief is that we have to get quiet in order to discern the difference.
You do talk about this.
And that silence create space for us to be honest with ourselves and start to listen not just to the noise of what everyone else thinks we should be doing or what we're seeing on social media about the right things to do. And the wisdom that we hold is always within. And if we get quiet enough and tune into our hearts and our souls, then that wisdom is able to emerge. And so one of my best friends asked me when I was trying to make a decision about staying in, as a coach or pursuing another job. She said, "What would you do?" She asked me this question, so I'll give it to you because you can always ask yourselves this question or share it with others. What would you do if fear was not present?
Yes.
What would you do if
This
fear
is this
was
is a
not
good question for the chat,
present?
for the audience. So,
Yeah,
and can we add money into that? If we remove money and fear and
mhm,
people's expectations, you should do this because,
totally.
family, we're lawyers and doctors. If you remove that fear and the worry about money, what would you do next?
Laura, let's create some silence.
Yeah, let's
Let's
take
do
a minute.
like a couple minutes silence. This is your gift. What would you do if fear was not present, if money was not the driver? Tap into yourself and what would you do?
Feel free to write it in the chat when you come up with something. Jen, maybe can you read a few of those out in a minute?
My heart is bursting. Like I just get so excited when I see people name a desire.
Yeah.
And I think it just as an example, like to have a few seconds of silence. And sometimes it's helpful to do it in community because it's hard to create our own silence because
Mhm.
our brains, are always going. So I'm imagining that even just those couple minutes, someone could have had an aha and it changed the direct trajectory of their life. So travel, live on the beach, and have lots of dogs, says Julie. Rescue stray and abandoned animals, start a nonprofit animal sanctuary, Jade. I would volunteer at senior living facilities. Oh, such a huge need.
Oh,
Such a huge need. That's Vanessa. Focus on art, writing, gardening. Janice Craig. My goodness, these are neat. So here's what is so amazing. Okay, talk about calling. When we tap in to what we are created for, that so I have this belief that if we all were operating out of the place of which we were created for, then the world would not have no lack. If we were all giving from the place that we're designed to give, there would be no lack in the world.
Mhm.
All the needs would be met. And I'm reading these. These are real needs in the world that
Mhm.
people have. I
Mhm.
dance much more. Yes, that's
Mhm.
Christine.
Mhm.
So that's part of the internal work is yes, there are the practicalities of working in job search and the paycheck. And there's also the acknowledgement of what would I do if I didn't have to do those things? And what if there was a way to blend those in a way that would blow your mind that you never imagined? I'll give you an example. When I was on my path, I had gone through a divorce, left Seattle, left my job, and was seeking what was next. Very scary time, but I also was following my peace and I knew I was doing what I needed to do. And I was super passionate about anti-human trafficking and
Mhm.
widows in Africa. Okay. Two different things.
Mhm.
And I felt a little bit crazy because I kept going down the paths to try to learn which organizations are doing this work. And, and I'm going to Africa and I'm doing this volunteer work to explore this. And then I'm going to these conferences about anti-trafficking and I'm learning about this other world. I could not make those two things come together. And then somebody reached out to me who I had met at a conference years ago, and he asked me if I would be the director of recruiting at International Justice Mission. And I explored it. I didn't want to be in DC, didn't want a 9 to 5 job, didn't want to go back into recruiting. But what I saw as I explored that organization, they protected the rights of women, the
Mhm.
widows in Africa when their land was being stolen after their husbands died, the
Mhm.
land grabbing. They
Mhm.
protected women in Africa and they did anti trafficking, anti slavery work. I could never have made those things come together. But once I saw it, even though in my mind it was like, oh, I want to be in another country, I want to do some other thing. But I was like, no, this is where I'm needed. This
Mhm.
is where my skill set and my heart lines up most right now in this season. So I'm going to
Mhm.
do this.
Wow. I'm doing something somewhat similar in a month.
Tell us.
I'm moving to Ethiopia um, for my son to reconnect with his roots and both of us to hone our Amharic. But also, I have a dream of being a social media influencer to promote tourism, which I see as a great anti-poverty program for the whole country and a way to spread the amazing place of Ethiopia and all that it offers the world.
Can I
So
ask you more about that?
yeah. So for me, that's my next step.
So, how did you come to that? Because this is happening, yes?
Yeah, in a month. Yeah,
In a month, you're going to
I'm
go do
moving.
this thing. Where did that start? The idea.
I think the idea started with a desire to give. I mean, happiness, I don't mean to sound hedonistic, but you take from yourself and you give to others. And it's also about connecting. And so having a son from Ethiopia and wanting to connect with as many people there as possible and retain language, which is so much a part of his culture, is knowing
Mm,
his language. Um, it just seemed like a no-brainer to find a way to go back. But I mean, I'm not a big social media influencer, but
mm,
I'm going to learn. And I've got a whole crew of people who do this kind of thing for a living through a YouTube
mm.
channel and a producer on a TV show that my son and I were on to help. So it's almost like it's unfolding before me and I'm not
Yeah.
even driving it right now. So
I
it's
want to point out what you're doing in the middle of this. As you're pursuing this desire that you have and this idea, you're building a new community within that. You're
totally.
building a pride as
Mhm.
you go and people that you can learn from and partner with. So, what advice do you have for those of us who are dreaming?
Well, what you were saying before, don't let fear drive you. That so much of our careers and our lives are driven by fear, fear of failure, fear of losing everything, and going broke, fear of, you know, maybe if we were leaving a bad relationship, not finding someone else. But just that don't let fear be your driver, I guess. There's risks in any change, any decision in life come requires a leap of faith. So I guess don't be ruled by fear would be my advice. Yeah. I
I
also,
mean,
I'm gonna, I forgot to make a slide for this, but everybody here today can get free access to Callings through by doing www.callings.ai/Jen, three letters Jen, and you can have I think it's 2 months. It might be 3 months. I can't remember what we set it up as, but it's free access to Calling. So I do want to spend some time, maybe in a minute, showing people some of the tools that can help them do the things we talked about today. So again, I'm not going to focus on how do you use Callings to tailor your resume and cover letter and apply for jobs, but more on the before you're ready to apply for that job, figuring out where it is you want to go. Yeah. Is now a good time to do that? Was there any other, I haven't really given you a chance to close, Jen, but maybe, if people can, if you want to close out by telling people to take one small step, or is there anything that I didn't raise today that you were hoping to be able to talk about?
the only thing I want to leave people with is to understand the strength that is within you, that we all have it. It's not just available to some people. There is an incredible strength and resiliency and courage and confidence that lies within us. It just needs to be tapped into and to find your pride. Find the people that are going to help you develop that. I consider confidence a muscle to be developed, just like in personal training.
Hmm,
And I consider courage the same, that it's something that we practice and we get stronger and stronger and stronger. So find your people, explore your dreams, and yes, take those practical steps too, but don't lose sight of the soul and what your soul is calling you to.
great. Thank you. Jay, are there any questions or comments in the chat, things that you want to call out, identify right now before we go to, and I show people some tools that they can use?
There are not,
Okay.
but if you're a member of the audience and you have a question, feel free to pop it in chat or in the Q&A function.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so Callings is, I mentioned earlier, it's a complete platform, start to finish for your job search. But I want to put the emphasis today on what happens before you go looking for jobs. Because the first part is to know yourself. And if you, when you log into Callings, you're going to see everything on the left toolbar, and it's organized from top to bottom. I want to focus on what's at the top first, which is the insights. So once you put your resume in, you're going to get a questionnaire under My Insights, and there's 28 questions in it. And I'm not going to open it up and show it to you because yours is going to be different than mine. It's going to be based on your resume. So for me, Jen, a lot of the questions were things to try to figure out, do I want to stay in recruiting? Because that's where I had come from. And do I want to be a recruiter or do I want to be leading people? Do I want to be outside the organization as an advisor? Do I want to be training people? How do I want to be spending my time? So once you fill out that questionnaire, then you're going to get a job description and your goals. So I'm going to show you the goals. These can, by the way, you can edit these if you don't agree with them. But to me, the most important thing is my role, my industry, the opportunity for growth, the use of technology, and the culture. The work environment, a little less important. And frankly, and even the social impact used to be more important, a little less important for me now. My schedule, not that big of a deal. So it's going to rank your goals and explain to you based on what you said, what it thinks is important to you. So you have that in front of you. I'm going to skip the market fit right now and show you another thing that it creates is your dream job description. And for some women, I've had women on calls before where I've been showing them the tools and they've said, oh, this is way too high of a job for me. My next step is 2 steps below this. And I'll say, really? because you've been doing what you're doing for 12 years. Like, so we tend to undersell ourselves as women a lot of times and not think we're ready for me, chief of talent acquisition. So it's going to reach high. And the reason I like this is because it's a circuitous way to get at what it is you want to do. How do you want to spend your time? And it's written in the responsibilities. So for me, I want to spend my time in talent acquisition, in recruiting, leading, developing tech tools, promoting DEI, training, building capacity. These are the kinds of things that will be reflected back to you in your job description when you take the time to fill out the questionnaire. And then from there, some people say, well, I'm going to paste this into ChatGPT and see if this kind of job exists. You might find some interesting jobs that you want to apply for that are similar to this. But it even made up a company name for me, Global Health Innovators. And I'll tell you, before I joined Callings, I was working with another platform and I was checking out the competition. And I used this tool and I produced this dream job description and I thought it was real. And I looked at it and said, oh my God, they found my dream job. And I went looking for what is Global Health Innovators. And then I realized when I went up here and read under my ideal job description that it said a fictitious job posting. So this is just to help you dream and a creative way to get you thinking. But after you do this, your goals and your dream job description, it's worth spending some time running your market fit report. This is a way to help you focus on where are you going to be building relationships? Where are you going to be going to events? How are you going to be spending your time in your job search? You can't apply for everything, right? So if you're reverse engineering your job search, instead of just download, apply, if you're being more deliberate and thinking about where do I belong and what do I want to do, this is a crucial step because it will help you figure out the kinds of companies or organizations you want to work for. So for me, I had come from global health and the industry is eviscerated. It's essentially imploded. There's probably 1/10 or 1/20th the number of jobs today that there were 2.5 years ago or 2 years ago. So I have had to figure out, well, where do I want to pivot to? And I ran this market fit report and it helped me see growing industries and the kinds of companies I might want to consider. So it identified HR technology companies, for instance, and came up with some suggested companies for me to check out. Digital health, AI healthcare companies, and government consultancies. Actually, it said these are stable. It'll tell you the health of that particular sector here. So this is growing. See here it says that. And then there's all these reports in here. You can read about where it gets its data and which kinds of companies are similar to these. This is just to get you started, right? So I wanted to spend a couple minutes on this because once you know what kinds of companies you want to focus on, then you can go to this whole new part of the website we've created called networking. And networking is where people should be spending a majority of their time, not download and apply. So, how do you know where to network? Well, these kinds of companies you can add, and we go to events, and it's going to identify what are the events online, but mostly in person, that are going to connect you with other people that can help you with your job search. So, you see how this came up with coffee and conversations, mental health, and networking. So, some of these might just be other job seekers like you. And some of them might be specifically focused on recruiting. This one's online, a career event. And then some are in your industry. They're called industry events. This is brand new. You guys are the first seeing this. It's only been up, I think we released it about 4 or 5 days ago. After you look at events, you can then look at, well, who are the recruiters who are known in this space? And for me, in HR technology companies or health companies, those are the two industries. And you'll see here that there's a list of these people who are specifically targeting recruiters, talent acquisition professionals in these industries. And you can read all about them and then reach out to them. When you hit reach out, you'll notice we've done something that not even LinkedIn does for you, which is give you the person's email address right there.
Wow.
I know.
That's
It's
awesome.
it's pretty cool. So you can hit open draft and it'll connect to your email, or you can just copy and paste. We've given you a suggested email to contact this person to get things started, but you can write your own. Like, let's say that Lauren speaks French. You can translate the whole message into French. You can shorten this. You can say, Lauren and I attended the same conference in Louisville, Kentucky. So here it is in French. Um, so I'm going to just give you an example of that. We attended the same SHRM conference,
Wow.
and it'll incorporate that into the message for. So this is the way that you can start reaching out to people who can help you in your job search. Yep. And I don't speak French, so I can't tell you if it did that, but hopefully it did what I asked it to. Anyway, another thing is the associations. I want you to associate with people. I want you to be getting out there and talking to people. I want you going to events. These are the kinds of things that will help keep you from getting depressed and help you learn about jobs and help you connect with people who can get you jobs. So, what I want people to spend their time more on is this aspect of a job search, which is the beginning part that we talked about, the soul searching. Where do they belong? What do they want to do? And then the connecting. Because I mean, we've when it comes to actually the applying, and we do that, I'll show it to you, but we've got machines talking to machines, and it's really hard to stand out now when a recruiter gets 500 or 1,000 applicants. And so the way we're gonna do it is we're gonna help you build relationships with the kinds of people who can help you. Okay, the last two things I want to show you in community really build on what Jen was talking about when she said an example of who can you call on to say, will you do a mock interview with me? Well, we've got a way to do that now through Callings. And you see here under coffee meetups and community support. So coffee meetups is somebody that you're going to do your job search with. So you want to talk to somebody every week or every month, and Callings will match you with somebody who is most similar to you. And you can click this and then fill out the form. But if you just want somebody to help you with one particular interview that you're preparing for, you click this request support and you say, I want to talk strategy, or I want to prepare for my interview. And it's anonymous. You will not, your name won't be revealed or your contact information until we find somebody somebody says, I'll do that. And then you get introduced to each other and somebody can help you with a mock interview. So that's a way at Callings we have built in community. I don't know if you've seen this, Jen. It's only been out for a week, so I probably didn't even run it by you. But
I
the
love it. I love it. And I just want to say, Laura and I have been in the recruiting world and career coaching world for a long, long time. I always now recommend Callings because it is all of these tools in one. It is such an effective use of your time when you're in a
yeah,
job search. That what you all have pulled into this platform is incredible. I
yeah.
recommend it all the time.
Thank you. Yep, we do have speakers who know a lot about AI tools, and usually they're individual tools, and we've brought
Mhm.
everything in one place. So I talked a little bit about the soul searching and how Callings can help you get more insights about yourself. I talked about how we connect you with other people who are on the platform and identify people, recruiters and events. I do want to show you how you can identify people connected to a particular job and use Callings to apply for that job. And then I also want to show you how you can promote yourself. So this is something new we're putting out there because you have to be seen, you have to be visible, and it can't just be download a job description, tailor your resume, and apply, right? It's got to be beyond that. So we've got some tools to help people do that. But I'm going to show you how to use Callings to apply for a job. Your job tracker, for a lot of people, this is their central command. This keeps track of what jobs have you applied for and where are you at with them. So I'm going to show you, this one was dated a couple of months ago, but I'll show you this as an example. If you find this job that you're interested in, this is a company called IQVIA. I think it's in your neck of the woods or where you're from, Jen, in North Carolina. It's
Yeah.
an outgrowth of FHI, FHI
Okay.
360, Quintiles. Anyway, I was interested in this organization, so I found this job and I put it on my tracker. And you can use Callings to prepare to tailor your resume. You can go through here and edit it. You can take take it or leave it. You don't have to keep all the things. It accepts suggestions. You can reject them and keep the original. You can also go in here and change things, right? And just type and then save it. Okay. Same thing for a cover letter. I don't recommend just using Callings or any AI tool to tailor and send because you need to look at it. It needs to be your words. AI still can hallucinate and it can still exaggerate. And so you need to be comfortable with what it is. Think of it as a first draft, and you're going in there and tailoring what it came up with. Okay. So by now, most people have seen AI tools that can help them with their resume and cover letter. But here's the cool thing. We have this additional tab called Network. And when you click on that, you're going to see a list of people who are connected to that very job at the company. Not even LinkedIn gives this to you. And when you see that Brenda is currently on the team, she's probably not the hiring manager, but she's probably on the team that this person will be on. And you can read what you might have in common with Brenda. What do you both focus on? And then again, if you want to reach out to her, here's a suggested email that might come up for you to write to her. Cool stuff. You can open draft email and see there's her email address, and it's been verified. So you can start building relationships with people at your target companies this way by identifying who's connected to the jobs that you're interested in. And then we also help you prepare for the interview, what might be asked, what are some questions that you might want to prepare and answers. So we've got all these kinds of bells and whistles too, but the last thing I wanted to really put a little emphasis on is the promotional element of yourself. So you have to be visible. And how do you do that? We have two ways. The first is called My Campaign. And down here, you can watch this video about it where we only have 5 minutes, so we're not going to watch it now, but it's a 2-minute video that will walk you through how to create this. And here I'm going to edit my calling card. And for me, I chose an action figure, and it came up with an action figure about me and a description of what I need help with. Called me a global talent strategist. And it said, help Laura find her next role, and have this really cool summary of me. Again, you can edit this if you want. And 4 different points that it pulled out that it thinks are particularly significant. And you can forward this to people. You can post this on LinkedIn. You can put this on Twitter. There's a lot of things you can do with this. Again, you don't even have to choose the action figure. You can choose a movie poster, for instance, and put yourself in the movie. There's a variety of ways to do that. But along with that, in order to become more visible, it's time to start producing podcasts, posts for LinkedIn, articles that you can blog, Substack articles. And the way that you can do that is with the help of this My Post feature. So when you click on it, it's going to identify some themes of what might you want to write about. So we helped somebody who left CARE, the organization that I was at, who said he didn't want to work, and there's no more jobs in global development where he was working, but he did a lot in agriculture and he knows a lot about food. And he was motivated by an article in the New York Times to try to reduce food waste. He read an article that said half of food in America is wasted, which is like obscene, mind-boggling. And so he took the My Post feature and started to write some articles about the work that he had done at CARE in the refugee camps that he had worked with to help people grow food and reduce waste. So now, once he's got a few articles with the help of My Post, he can reach out to people he'd like to work for or with and say, I wrote this post on this article that's relevant to your work and mine. And then he has something to offer and not just something that he's seeking. So for me, it came up with these themes of career pivoting, recruitment, marketing, talent analytics. And you can use this to then come up with articles. It'll come up with a draft. It'll come up with some ideas. And then you can come up with a calendar and post them. 1 article a week, LinkedIn, Substack, wherever you want. And it'll even track your analytics for where your articles are being seen. So I know I've thrown a lot at you and we're just about out of time, but I hope you've all gotten a sense of how Callings can help you wherever you want to go next. And even if it's not a full-time job, or even if it's not a career pivot, but there's lots of tools on there that can help you. And Jen, we have 2 minutes, so I wanted to give you the last couple minutes. I'm sorry I talked a little bit more than I thought I would. But can you wrap this up for us?
I mean, I just love what Callings is doing. It's so fantastic, and it's you keep creating more and more stuff, which is so amazing. I would say lean in. People lean into the tools that are available and hold yourself accountable and ask others around you to hold yourself accountable for digging in, maybe setting a goal every week of what you're going to do in your transition so that you keep moving forward, keep making some progress, and just remind yourself of all the things that you're doing and the characteristics that you embody. It's a hit on our ego when we go through a job transition and we forget just how remarkable we actually are. So find your community and your pride that can keep you reminded of just how fantastic you are.
Thank you, everybody. This is one person wrote that they thought that this was a religious, this is not, Callings is not a
No.
faith-based organization. So Callings is open to everybody. And Jen's just being honest and open about who she is.
Yeah.
So thank you, everybody, for joining. I really appreciate it. You can send me questions if you've got any. I'll put my email address in the chat.
You can get 30 days of premium access by going to Callings.ai/Lioness,
Yeah. Oh, I
just
did.
like the name in the
Awesome.
book, slash
Thank you.
Lioness. Callings.ai
I
slash
just typed it
Lioness.
in. Thank you, Garrett. Thank you. I had thought we put it under Jen's name, but I just wrote it down. 30 days for free. And feel free to stay on for a couple more minutes if you have questions. So we're not gonna break the Zoom quite yet.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I've got one question from Catherine. So
Hmm.
if you've already had a free trial that has expired, will this give you another 30 days?
No, we ask people to start paying. It's really well worth it.
Mhm.
Yeah. The cheapest thing is to do it 1 year, which is just about a little over $100.
Oh, wow.
Well worth it.
Definitely.
Any other questions?
I will say if people want to find out more about the career coaching that I do that could be supplemental to Callings, it's jenportercoach.com is how you can
Can you
reach me.
type that in the chat? I'm
Hmm.
sorry, I didn't
Yep.
need to say that. Yes, Liza said, can this be used from Canada? Yes, we have people in the Democratic Republic of Congo who use Callings. We have people in South Sudan. We have people all over the world. Yes. And we've tested it. So they get jobs from all over the world too.
For some reason, I'm not able to type in the chat right now, but
Oh,
it's
okay.
jen jenportercoach.com.
One word.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
There it
Do
is.
you see what I wrote in the chat? Is that
Yeah,
right?
that's right. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Jay.
And I put my email so people can write to me too, and I can forward messages to Jen. Thanks. Thank you, Jen. Can we have a discussion briefly? I'll send you another link.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody. Bye.